Lately, I've been hearing the slogan, faith over fear. Faith over fear has become a great pitch line for many people selling products and promoting their brand, as well as preachers preaching to attract listeners. Faith over fear is a great rally cry, especially in a society filled with pandemic, social and civil unrest, uprisings, political dissension, and all the chaos that appears to be going on around us. Faith over fear has become one of the most popular Christianese sayings in recent times. So what does it really mean for us to have faith over fear, especially in a world filled with fears? Let's proceed. Fear is a strong emotion that can be real or imagined, rational or irrational, normal or abnormal. Fear causes in us fight or flight. It also can paralyze us from acting, grip us, oppress us, and sometimes overtake us. Many times throughout the Holy Bible, God tells us, do not fear or fear not. We are told repeatedly not to fear circumstances, people, or anything in this world, including demonic forces. We are only to fear the Lord our God and serve Him only. When we allow fear of circumstances of life, fear of people, the devil, or bumps in the night, it grips us, oppresses us, and overtakes us. It places our fearing the Lord in a second or third place position. Jesus explains it this way, Luke chapter 12, 4-7. I tell you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that can do no more. But I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who, after your body has been killed, has authority to throw it into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. Faith over fear is one of those Christianese sayings that is easier to say, even believe, but altogether different to practice. Why? Because fear is a natural emotion, a natural instinct. All living beings are subjected to emotions. Every living being feels fear when they encounter a threat, danger of harm, health or status, or anything that is held valuable. Fear causes certain changes in the brain, thereby causing a reaction according to the situation, which produces a change in behavior. So if fear is a natural emotion that God gave us, then why does He continually tell us not to fear or fear not? Good question. To better understand what God means by telling us not to fear or fear not, we have to understand what type of fear the Lord is speaking of. The word commonly used for fear in the Old Testament is yareh, which means frightened, be in a panic, to be in terror, dreadful. In the New Testament, it is the word phobos, where we get the English word phobia, which means to be put in a fear or fearfulness, frightened, a feeling of dread. Both the Hebrew and Greek words for fear speak of being in a state of fear, a dreadfulness, frightened, and not that of sudden or startling fear. There is a difference between being startled with sudden fear and that of being gripped by fear itself. Being startled, surprised, shocked, scared, or stunned is a natural response followed by an appropriate reaction, fight or flight. Whereas fearfulness, frightened, being in a terror, or having a feeling of dread is a state of being. A state of being describes your current circumstances and present state of existence. It's your state of mind and physical condition that affects your present state of existence. For example, being happy is a state of being. You think and feel jovial and content at that present time. Now that we have a better understanding of the type of fear God speaks of not having, let's look at an example of what God means when He says fear not or do not fear. Exodus chapter 14 verses 10-16. And when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. And they were sore afraid. And the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord. And they said unto Moses, Because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us, to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is it not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. And Moses said unto the people, Fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which He will show you this day. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, you shall see them again no more forever. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. And the Lord said unto Moses, Wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel, that they go forward. But lift thou up thy rod, and stretch out thine hand over the sea, and divide it, and the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. What do we see in this passage? 1. It was natural for the Israelites to be suddenly startled, frightened, scared, surprised, and stunned for concern about their life and well-being. 2. It is their response to sudden, startling fear that is quite telling. It was that of being gripped and overtaken by fear. Their response was that of dread and terror, showing more fear of the Egyptians than fear of the Lord. 3. We see their behavior to fear was to freeze, complain, and cry, irrationally and inappropriately, claiming the Lord, not Moses, because they knew Moses was but an instrument by which God had delivered them from the Egyptians, and they accused God of bringing them to the wilderness to die at the hands of the Egyptians. They even said it was better for them to return to serve the Egyptians. Just think about it for a moment. They had seen the hand of God perform all kinds of miracles and wonders, smiting the Egyptians, and now God is helpless to do anything as the Egyptians march towards them? Now here's what's most interesting in this passage. The Lord said to Moses, Wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel, that they go forward. The Lord basically tells Moses, your response to fear was appropriate in trusting me. Now act upon what you spoke. So instead of crying to me, tell the people to act. Go forward. Here is the Lord telling Moses to exercise his faith over fear. Faith or fear does produce in us a behavior, an action. Our action or reaction to fear is what determines whether it is overcome by our faith. Let's look at another example in the New Testament. Matthew chapter 14, verses 25 through 33. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. Peter replied, Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. Ye of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? What we see is that Peter's fear overrode his faith, causing him to doubt what he had actually started doing. Jesus had already told Peter, before he started walking on the water, to be of good courage or take courage, which is the Hebrew word tharseo, which literally translates to radiate confidence. And it specifically refers to God bolstering the believer, empowering them with a bold inner attitude. For the believer, tharseo is the strength by his or her inner working of faith. So what Jesus actually told them was, don't be afraid, or may, which is not, and phobos, fear, not fear. Do not be terrified, dreadful, or frightened. What Jesus had spoken to Peter was that of having faith over fear, to be of good courage or take courage, tharseo. We must understand that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of fear. Our action and reaction to fear is the best option for overriding, overcoming, or overtaking fear. So Peter stepped out and began walking on the water. But then it tells us that when Peter saw, which is the word blepo, which means more than just physically seeing something, but it actually means perceive, discern. And Peter perceived and discerned the wind, and he was afraid, phobos, and began to sink and cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him and says to him, You of little faith, why did you doubt? Peter started out with courage in his attempt to walk on water, yet he did not finish with faith, and Jesus called it little faith. And he asked Peter, why did you doubt? Peter probably shrugged his shoulders. I don't know. But the answer is blepo. His perception, his physical discernment brought to him fear. Peter began to fear his circumstances more than his trust in God, which resulted in him doubting. Fear is a powerful emotion that is governed and operates by senses. Faith is metaphysical or spiritual, based upon belief in a power greater than our own. Fear and faith are often opposed to each other. In the emotions of man, one must conquer the other. Either fear prevails or faith prevails. Fear brings to the senses feelings of uncertainty, doubt, which can and does at times overtake our faith when we allow our perception of immediate danger, or when we can't point to an immediate deliverance because our own reasoning cannot comprehend and explain the things of God. So we act in fear, panic, or dread, or become terrified, acting on our senses and feelings rather than our trust in God. We must understand, it's not that we won't have the sense of fear, but it is our perception of our fear. It's either we give into our physical perception, our senses and feelings that cause us to doubt, or we override our senses of feeling with trust in God, that our faith keeps us moving forward. Faith over fear. In comparison of Peter's situation with that of what God said to Moses, we see that having faith over fear is our response to fear that demonstrates whether we are fearful or faithful. It is in the action or reaction to fear that is seen whether we have faith over fear or fear over faith. This is why God told Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the people to move forward. Act upon your faith over fear." And it is also why Jesus said to Peter, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Because Peter, who initially stepped out and began walking on water, allowed his senses and feelings to stop him from moving forward, and his faith succumbed to his fear. Fear is a natural emotion, and every living creature feels fear. But to have faith over fear means for us not to allow our physical perception to override our trust and belief in the Lord's ability and capability to do on our behalf. The world-famous evangelist from the 1900s, Smith Wigglesworth, coined the phrase that most of us are familiar with. "I'm not moved by what I see. I'm not moved by what I hear. I'm not moved by what I feel. I'm only moved by what I believe." That's faith over fear. In the most well-known passage in the Bible, Psalms 23, David said, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." David tells us, though he may be in Salmaveth, which is shadow of death, which figuratively translates calamities, terrors of darkness all around me, I will not allow Yahweh, or fear, meaning to dread, be terrified, be fearful of evil, which is the word Ra. And the word Ra does not mean boogeyman evil, but is an all-inclusive term that means bad, injurious, or harmful things, from being unhappy to disagreeable to unpleasant. David says he continues to walk or to go forward in spite of these things because he knows that the Lord is with him, because thy rod and thy staff comforts me, which signifies that God will lead and guide him through his troubles that may be lined with some dark or gloomy times and points. So David is comforted, and David will continue to move forward. What God wants is for us to allow our faith in him to triumph over our senses and feelings. Faith is above feelings. Faith is not necessarily opposed to feelings. Faith works through feelings and makes the influence of our feelings subordinate to my faith in God. It is when we allow ourselves to have courage in our faith in God that faith overcomes fear. When we are convinced of God's truth, it conquers fear. Having a deep conviction of trust in the Lord, our mind and feelings become thoroughly convinced in the face of difficulties that greater things can be accomplished through our belief in the Lord. Now we're going to stop right here and pick up part 2 of Faith Over Fear next week. May God bless and keep you, my friends. In Jesus' holy and precious name, amen.
Thank you for tuning in to Fellowship in the Word. If you've been blessed by this video, please click the subscribe button and the bell to receive notification of when we upload new videos. Thank you, and God bless you.